This is Dr. Kavita Singh, Associate Professor in the Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Department of Civil Engineering. So today our topic will be for discussion will be visual image interpretation techniques. So in the previous lecture we have just discussed about the different kinds of interpretation techniques. We have just understood about what is interpretation. Interpretation means how to read the image, how an interpreter can read an image and get the information out of it to get a beneficial data. So today we are just going to understand or learn about the visual interpretation. So there are two types of data. One is analog data, one is digital data. So here visually, how can we just interpret the information and just give the proper information to the interpreter so that we can just get an output of that data. So just we'll go through the contents before we go to the visual interpretation techniques. So today we have the contents about visual interpretation techniques, data interpretation and visual interpretation techniques, basic principles of image interpretation, basic elements of image interpretation, examples of image interpretation, advantages of image interpretation. So these are all we are going to cover in this topic. So first of all, let us understand what is a visual interpretation techniques. So what is interpretation? We have also discussed in the previous lecture. So interpretation means reading a map language, like if we have an image. So image will be having different types of features present on that map. So how to read that image, how to understand that image, because nothing will be written on the image, only the features we can see in the image. So that image will be having sometimes in different color, it will be having in some false color, it will be having in some black and white color. So how can we interpret it? How can we read that? So that we are going to learn today. So what is visual interpretation? Act of examining images to identify objects and judge their significance. So it is the act of examining the images. And examining the images means how can we examine the image? How can we identify the image? How can we judge their significance? What kind of feature it is? Where it is located? How can we identify the feature? So what are the significance of that particular feature present in that? And information extraction process from the images. So an interpreter is a specialist trained in the study of photography or imagery in addition to his own discipline. So aerial photographs and remote sensing images employ electromagnetic energy as mean to detecting measuring the target characteristics. That means aerial photographs and remote sensing images. So aerial photographs, I hope you remember what is aerial photographs and what are these remote sensing images. So aerial photographs are the photographs which are captured by the aeroplane. So these photographs are having a very clear picture of the area wherever it is capturing the information. The reason is it is captured from a very short distance and it will be captured by a camera with a very high resolution. So aerial photographs will be having very clear view and very clear picture of the area, and moreover it gives us the information mostly in the true colors. So aerial photographs and remote sensing images employ electromagnetic energy. That means remote sensing images are images which are captured by the satellites, and that images will be always in false color. False color means it won't show its original color. It will show in some different band combinations, like sometimes blue color, red color, green color, or any black color. Depending on the type of the feature, it will show the radiation, it will show the color in the image. So how this energy is recorded, how the energy which is falling on the Earth's surface features, how it is recorded. So electromagnetic energy is the energy which is falling on the ground, which is falling on the surface of the Earth and having different kinds of feature. They measure or they reflect or they absorb differently and they react differently based on the type, texture, shape, size of the feature which are present on the Earth's surface. So involves a considerable amount of subjective judgment, highly dependent on capability of mind to generalize or takes place at different levels of complexity. Now, visual image interpretation, the image interpretation process can involve various levels of complexity from simple direct recognition of objects in the scene of their interference of the site conditions. So an example of this can be national highway or major river on the national highway or a major river on the satellite image. So what are the examples we can just recognize based on the some example like national highway? If we take an image, so highway will be having some kind of linear continuous series of linear line, and it will be somewhat thicker line than the normal road. So this way we can just identify it's a highway. So and along the highway there will be some trees grown. So based on this we can just say it's a highway. And river, if you want to identify the river in the image, so river will not be having a continuous series. I mean, it won't be a simpler straight lines. So river will be somewhat the formation of the river will be somewhat irregular. So the shape will be somewhat like this. So based on the shape and based on the color inside of the river, we can say it's a river. So these are few of the examples we can just identify, and most particularly on the false color composite, these kind of features are very hard to identify because in a false color composite, a water body will not appear in blue color, and the vegetation will not appear in green color, it will appear in some other color, like it will appear in green in color, and water body will appear in black in color. So it's very hard to identify. So how do we identify this kind of images visually? So we have some few key elements. Based on the key elements, we are able to identify or interpret the images from the satellite data. Right? So if the interpreter has some experience, the interpretation of their linear feature, road, river may straightforward. So that's what I was saying here. Interpreter has some experience, means if they know that, so if they want to interpret a road, so that means the road will be a linear feature, continuous linear feature, and road and river may be a straightforward features. Now when we see the next slide, so data interpretation and visual interpretation techniques. So remote sensing is a process of remote measuring objects from a distance without directly coming to a physical contact with them. So remote sensing we have studied long back. What is in the previous lectures? What is a remote sensing? So remote sensing is like capturing. Suppose here is the satellite and it is having a sensor over here, and here is the ground. So it captures this whole information without touching of this object. So it will not touch this object, but it will capture the entire information through the sensor. That is called as remote sensing. So visual image interpretation is the process of identifying when we see the images and communicate the information obtained from these images to others. So what is visual interpretation? Visually we see the image, either it's a hard copy, either it's a soft copy. So when you see the satellite image, we should be able to communicate this information to others. Suppose if somebody wants to know the information, instructor or interpreter should be able to identify the features, and they should be able to communicate to the others. They should be able to tell all the information to the others. So it is not restricted to making decision concerning what objects appear in images, but it also usually includes a determination of their relative locations and extents. And basic principles of image interpretation. So image is a pictorial representation of pattern of landscape. So pattern of landscape means pictorial representation means when you click an image, so image will be having lot of information in that, but they won't be written any kind of information. The information will be in the pictorial form. Pictorial form means if it is a tree, it will be having some shape. It's a building, it will be having some different shape. If it is a water body, it will be having a different shape. So all these information will be there in the pictorial form. So our interpreter, when they are interpreting the image, they should have this prior information, means how a river looks like, how a tree looks like, how a water body looks like, how a road looks like. If they know this all information, then an interpreter can be representing or reading the pictorial information from the image. So pattern indicates type of objects and their physical, biological and cultural relationship. So what does a pattern means? It will be having some indications of objects. Like pattern means, for example, if you grow a vegetation, so that will be grown in a some kind of pattern, vegetation or some kind of plantation we do, so that will be grown in a pattern, in a linear pattern or in a rectangular pattern or in a circular pattern. In a different way it is grown. And even if you see the houses somewhat will be in a pattern way, like sectors, if you see, these all sectors will be in the pattern form. So this is how on the landscape it will be available. This is how we just identify. And similar objects under similar conditions reflect similarly. So basic principles of image interpretation: when you see a similar objects, for example, when you see similar objects in sense, if we see vegetation, if we see forest, and if we see crop, so these are all similar objects, but it reflect in a similar conditions, it reflects similarly. Like if it is having same type of greenery, same type of water content present in that, same kind of leaf is that, so it will reflect similarly. But sometimes when the variation comes in the color of the leaf, then it may reflect different. So a systematic examination of photos and supporting material, and interpretation is made of physical nature of the object. So interpretation means physical nature of the object, means how physically we can just identify the object and we can just find out the image. So information extracted is proportional to knowledge, skill, experience of analyst and the methods and equipment used. Next, coming to the basic elements of image interpretation. So there are few of the elements which are totally dependent on this image interpretation. So example of image interpretation of IARE lists 3 false color composite imagery of the identification of 18-kilometer pipeline from the Patancheru to Amberpet. This is one example we can say if you want to identify in the satellite image, because always the satellite image will be in the false color composite. What is false color composite? We generally call it as FCC. That means when the satellite image is there, in a satellite image we will see that the vegetation, suppose here we have a forest area, we have some vegetation grown here, we have a water body present over here, there is a road, there is a railway. There are many features which will be present on the earth surface which is captured. So here if we see the forest area, when we talk about FCC, FCC is the false color composite. It won't be in the true color. It won't show the information in true color. It will always show the information in false color, because false color it will show in the red. Vegetation it will show in the red color. Okay. Now if it is a water body, it will show black in color. Why black in color? Because the water body will be having some suspended materials present in that, and that suspended materials which are present in that, based on that, water will be very much polluted and the radiations which is falling on that water body will be absorbed. So that's the reason the water body shows and the reflection won't be there. So that's the reason the water body will be appearing black in color. So now, for example, if you want to show how to identify the 18 kilometers pipeline from the Patancheru to Amberpet of Hyderabad city, which carries the industrial effluents, is an indirect approach. In this case, the actual pipeline cannot be seen. So if you want to find out the actual pipeline on a satellite image, we can't see the actual pipeline because it is not at all visible. It may be underground and it's not visible. But if there is a often change at the ground surface caused by the buried pipeline, which are visible on FCC. So for example, if we have a satellite image, in the satellite image, if we see there is a pipeline, if you want to identify whether the pipeline is there or not, then we just, how do we identify? Based on the association, like pipeline is overlaid here, but we can't see in the image. What we can see is, so the nearby mud will be somewhat elevated, like this it will show in the satellite image, where the texture of that area will be elevated because it will be digged, the ground will be digged and this area will be elevated. So based on that, we can just tell that the buried pipeline which will be visible in the FCC. FCC is false color composite. So the process of interpretation should also consider the dates to identify the ground cover types. Key that provide useful references. The key that provides the useful references of refresher materials and valuable training aids for interpreters are called interpretation keys. So for visual interpretation, we need some keys Based on that key, we are able to interpret the image. If we know these key elements, then it's very easy to interpret a satellite image or an aerial photograph or a black and white image of the satellite data. So key that provides a useful reference or refresher materials and valuable training aids. Valuable training aids means it will give a training aid to just identify, for the interpreter to identify the information from the image. So there are two types of keys which can be helpful for identification. That is selective key and the elimination key. So the selective key is also called as the reference key. Selective key means selected area which we are going to identify, and elimination key is which we don't want, we just remove that area, we just select that area and just remove that area. So these are called as selective key and the elimination key. That means if I want to find out only the roads, so my selection will be only on the roads. So here will be road, here will be road, there will be road here, there will be road here. So my selection key is only road. So what is the elimination key here? I don't want these areas. So we just remove the rest of the areas and we'll just go with the selected area. So these are the two ways of types of keys which we use: selection key and elimination. Now basic elements of image interpretation, like key just now what we were discussing years ago. Systematic study of aerial photographs and satellite imagery usually involves several characteristics of features shown in an image. So what are the basic elements we have here is tone, texture, association, shape, size, shadow, site factor and topographical location, and we have factor. So basically, if we go with this interpretation techniques, visual interpretation techniques, these are the key elements which we have to remember. Key elements which we have to remember to interpret the image, to identify the image and to identify the different kind of information from the satellite. So basic elements of key image interpretation that we have here, just now what I have discussed with you. So if we talk about shape, size, tone, site, texture, shadow, association, pattern. So just observe these images. Like we have here example of shape. So that depends on the object outline. Shape means if we see this kind of shape, so it's like a race course or some kind of stadium which will be having this kind of definite shape. So we can just identify with the help of the shape. Like here also we have a different kind of shape where we have some fields. So with the help of the shape, we are able to identify the object present on the image. Now with the sizes, like we have different sizes here, like we have residential areas here, we have a big building over here. So we have some more buildings over here. So based on the different sizes related to one another, like comparison to one another, we can just find out the information. Like tone, if we go through the tone, brightness, hue color, brightness and hue color, like you have same type of shapes here, right? So here one shape is there, one shape is there, one shape is there, but it is having different colors, right? So if you see this imagery, and this is actually it's a field, because field will be in the regular like a rectangular type of feature, or a what is a square kind of things. So here this is like 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all fields, but in this 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see the field color is having white. But whereas if you see the fifth one, you will see the tone or the color of the field is in some dark color. That means this field is still it is having crop, right? So these are all fields which are not having crop. So these are, we can say that, harvested fields. Okay, harvested fields. Now you have a site location and helps us for the recognition. So sometimes if you are unable to identify these objects, so just will see the nearby site or what kind of site factor it is having, what kind of topography it is having. So based on the site, we can just assume that this kind of feature may be a so-and-so feature, either it is a field, it's a forest, or some kind of stadium based on this kind of site factor. Now texture, what does it mean? What is a texture? Texture is a smoothness and roughness. How the texture will be smoothness and roughness. So either the texture will be smooth, either the texture will be rough. Okay. So rough texture is looks like elevated. Somewhat rough texture will be looking like elevated, and smooth texture is plain. So based on the smooth and rough, we can say these portion are having a lot of forest present here, a lot of trees, because we can see the heads of this top of the forest area, and this portion is somewhat we can say vacated or removed, forest are removed from these areas. Now shadow, sometimes we are unable to identify the feature from the satellite image or the aerial photograph. So what in that case, what we can do is just we can see the shadow. Suppose this is a building, and if we see the shadow of the building, we can just identify which kind of building it is. Like suppose a tower is there, chimney is there. So it will be too tall building, so that it won't be visible in the properly visible in the image. It won't be identifiable feature. So what we do is just we see the shadow of these kind of buildings and we just identify the features. Now let us go with the association. Association means the things. Suppose this is a water body, right? So how we can say it's a water body? Because the first of all color and the shape of the water body and nearby areas. Association means features that are normally found near object. So near water body, what kind of features can be near water bodies? Some what is residential areas can be located, some industrial areas can be located, or some forest can be located. Like we can just go with this association. Next, we'll go with the pattern. So pattern, I told before also, pattern is like suppose sectors will be there. House sectors, it will be in a pattern like same kind of pattern, same line it will be located. Or else if you go with this plantation they will do in some pattern like this, like this, like so, like this, like this. In different patterns they will be growing the crops. So we can see here, you can just observe here, there is a pattern over here. So based on this pattern only, we can say this which kind of picture it is. Okay. So these are kinds of examples which we can identify. So here we have more color pictures. In the previous one we have seen the black and white things. Now you see the color picture of the real features. So this is very clear picture. Why? Because it's a aerial photographs. So this is taken by a aerial photograph and it gives a clear information about the features. So here very clearly it is visible that it's an airport and bare land. Like bare land means this area is totally bare, and you have a scrub over here, then a beach land over here. Here we have a bridge, you can see very clearly in the image. This is a aerial photograph, that's why the imagery is very much clear, which can be easily identified, and we know the type of the feature, we know the shape of the feature. With the shape only we can just identify it there, right? And here if you see this, these are commercial areas. Why? Because a lot of buildings you can see, small buildings we can see here. So these are all commercial areas over here. Now when we see desert, the texture of this area, you see how the desert looks like. So first of all, its color of its sand is you can see yellow in color, light yellow, or somewhat brownish color. And the texture of the soil or the texture of the sand, you can see somewhat rough texture here. Farmlands again you have with the shape we can see. So its shape will be either rectangle or some square, depending on the division of the farm. And you have a color difference in the farmland, that is some light green and dark green. You can see light green means it's maybe in the growing stage or harvested. Dark green means medium stage or almost grown crop it is there. Now football field in the previous slide also you have seen this kind of shape. So football field will be somewhat in a definite shape like this, like it will be in a stadium kind of shape. So we can just say it's a football field or stadium. Now forest, see the texture of the forest, the trees, top of the tree we can see here, see the texture of it. An industrial area, it has a lot of congested area, you can see here, lot of buildings here, so it's an industrial area. Now meadow is there, mountains, somewhat texture, you can see park, you can see it will be covering with the association or a boundary. Parking areas, you can see lot of cars or vehicles standing over here. Pond, you can see with the shape and the association is nearby is the vegetation. Port is there, and we have railway station, so there will be a track, it will be visible, and the rail it will be standing, like a lot of trains will be standing nearby it. Residential area will be somewhat in pattern, right? river will be in this irregular shape, and you have a viaduct, right? So like this, we can just identify. This is called as visual interpretation. It's like seeing the image and we are able to identify. So let us come to the key elements now. So key elements, tone refers to the relative brightness or color of objects in an image. Generally, tone is a fundamental element for distinguishing between different targets or features. So tone, you can see here, you have a tone here, you have a tone here. Tone here, you have dark color, you have light color. So what is the difference here? With the shape, we can say it's all the key elements are associated together, then only we can identify. So darker one is having some crops, lighter one is harvested, we can say. Okay, this is how we can identify with the tone. Texture, you can see the texture here. So this texture can be forest area, like refers to the arrangement of frequency of tonal variation. Particular areas of an image, rough texture would be consist of mottled tone, whereas the gray levels change abruptly, and small areas whereas smooth texture would be very little tonal variation. Smooth textures are most often result in uniform even surfaces such as fields, asphalts, or grasslands. So a target with a rough texture, a rough surface, and irregular structure such as forest canopy result in a rough textured appearance. Texture is one of the most important element distinguishing feature in the radar imaging. So you can just see the texture over here. So this texture is smooth texture. Okay. So texture is always meant with the smoothness or roughness. Okay, roughness. So here the texture is smooth, here the texture is somewhat rough. That means these are all elevated trees. So this is the forest area, and this nearby area is barren land, we can say. Okay. Shapes, just now we have discussed about the shape refers to the general form of structures outline the individual object. Shapes can be very distinctive clue or interpretation. Straight edge shapes typically represent urban or agriculture targets, while natural features such as forest edges are generally more irregular in shape, except where man has created a road or clear cuts. So farm or crop land, irrigated and rotating sprinkler system would appear in a circular shapes. So if you see a farm or a crop land which is to be irrigated or rotating sprinkler systems, and they may appear in a circular shapes. So it shows a satellite. This is the imagery for shape. Size we have already discussed. So here this definition is given. So size of the objects in an image is a function of scale. It is important to assess the size of the target relative to other objects in a scene, as well as the absolute size to aid the interpretation of the target. So a quick approximation of the target size can be direct interpretation to the appropriate more results quickly. Now pattern refers to the spatial arrangement. You can see the pattern here. Right? This is the pattern which is given with the spatial arrangements of visibly discernible objects. Typically, an orderly repetition of similar tones and textures will be produce a distinctive and ultimately recognizable pattern. Now, shadow, we see shadow is a helpful interpretation of it may provide an idea and profile to the relative height of the target or targets which may make identification easier. However, shadows can also reduce the eliminate interpretation in the area of influence, since targets within shadows are much less or not at all so discernible from their surrounding. Shadow is also useful for enhancing or identifying topography and landforms, particularly in the radar imagery. Like this is one tower here. So this is Washington Tower. So when you see the shadow of these, we can just say that it's a tower. Like that shadow of a temple also, if you see, shadow of a church also, if you see, you can just tell about this type of feature. Now association is, it is like association account relationship between other recognizable objects or features in proximity to the target interest. So the identification of features that one would expect to associate with another features may provide information to facilitate identification. So identification of association means sometimes if we are unable to identify this feature, so the associated feature we'll see and we can just tell about the features. Okay. Now, what are the advantages of image interpretation? So advantages we have image interpretation is we can do rapid analysis. Rapid analysis means when visual interpretation allows analysts to quickly interpret the large amounts of data and directly looking at the image, and they can even identify the patterns, anomalies, and features without extensive processing. So intuitive understanding, humans are naturally adept at processing visual information. So visual interpretation leverages this innate ability and making it easier for the analyst to understand complex spatial relationship and patterns in this data. So qualitative insights, visual interpretation often provides a qualitative analysis alone. So analysts can draw on their expertise and intuition to the infer meaning from the visual cues. Now, contextual understanding, visual interpretation allows analysts to consider contextual factors such as terrain, land use, infrastructure, which can be significantly impact an interpretation of imaging. Now, some more advantages that we see: versatility, like visual interpretation can be applied to the various types of imagery, including aerial photographs, satellite imagery, radar data, making it versatile tool for the different applications and domains. So it is widely applicable in the various types of data, right? Aerial photographs, satellite, radar, and different more kinds of information we can get through it. Cost effectiveness. So compared to the automated image analysis techniques, visual interpretation can be more cost effective, particularly for tasks that require human judgment, subjective interpretation, or qualitative assessment. And then we have adaptability. Adaptability is what visual interpretation techniques can be adapted to suit the specific needs of different applications and users. So analysts can employ various visualization methods and tools to enhance their interpretation process. Training and expertise. Visual interpretation relies on expertise and experience of analysts. Through training and practice, analysts can develop specialized skills for interpreting imagery accurately and effectively. Right? So, if interpreter will be given a training to interpret it, so it will be having they'll be having a benefit, like they can just with the help of training and practice, they can develop specialized skills for interpreting the imagery, and they accurately and effectively. Interpretation flexibility. Visual interpretation allows analysts to judge their approach based on the characteristics of the imagery and objectives of the analysis. So this flexibility enables the analyst to tailor their interpretation methods to specific task and the scenarios. Now, interpretation with other data sources. So visual interpretation can be complement or other data sources and analysis techniques such as GIS, geographical information systems, statistical modeling, and enhancing overall understanding of the complex phenomena. So we have visual interpretation is having a lot of advantages where we can just go through this data, and finally we can just get output out of this kind of data, right? So this is about the advantages. So these are few of the references which you can just go through and just find out the more content about it. So like always I refer this book is Dr. M.N.G. Reddy, Remote Sensing and GIS from various publications, New Delhi. So this book, if you want to refer, just go with the 4th edition book. So this 4th edition book will help you to get entire information about the visual interpretation with many more examples, and mostly you can understand more better if you go through these books. Now, if you want to get more e-content, you can just go to this link, that is NPTEL link, where you can just go through about the visual interpretation techniques. You have more lectures here. You can just go through this link and just find out more content about this kind of information. And if you want to go, GIS is like next part, coming part we'll be discussing. So coming lectures will be discussing about GIS. So if you want to know about GIS, you can just go through this book. And if you want to know more information about this remote sensing and GIS, just you can go through this another book called as Remote Sensing and GIS by Dave Hartler, which is from the Oxford University Press, New York. So these are the references. So in today's lecture, I hope you understood what is visual interpretation. So visual interpretation means visually how far we are able to read the image, how far we are able to understand the image. Because it's a map language, it's a picture language. So on a map, you may find many kinds of features with a symbol, right? So if you know the symbol is for what, then we can tell this symbol is for so and so. But in an image, when you click a image, when you click a photo, there will be all the information in the pictorial form. All the information will be in the form of pictures. So that pictures how we can interpret. So if you have some key elements with the help of tone is with the help of tone means color, with the help of texture, with the help of size, with the help of shape. Moreover, with the help of shadow, association, side factor. So these are the key elements. If you have this key, if an interpreter is excellent or experience is having a training in this kind of keys, then easily they can interpret it and communicate the information to others, right? So for today's lecture, that's all for today. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.